All right, good evening. We are starting the SilmFilm project script discussion, Season 1, Episode 3. We're going to be dealing with the origin story of Melkor today. So far, we've discussed the Lindale, we've discussed the creation of Arda, and now we're going back into the void, back before Arda was created, to talk about where Melkor came from. Mm-hmm. So the big question to me to start off with is what exactly we're doing in the frame here. One thing, Marie's here, awesome. One thing that we had kind of left off with last week was having Glorfindel possibly walk in on the lesson as Elrond is about to explain why there's evil in the world. Why there's evil in the world if the Valar are all getting along. You know, the Valar were struggling initially to figure out how to work together. They finally got that figured out, and so why is there bad stuff now? And Glorfindel walks in and interrupts the lesson. Nope, we lost your video. Interrupts the lesson because he's afraid that Elrond's going to start going really, really dark to a 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where we're picking up from, I believe.
Yeah.
Hi, Marie.
Hello. I have to admit I was not a huge fan of the Glorfindel interruption side bit.
I was not. It's not a horrible idea. And I feel like that episode could have ended without any difficulty whatsoever. Although it does bring into question if we spend any amount of time in the frame, there has to be some kind of conflict for this episode.
Right. And I think it was important to somehow bring up that Melkor is a word that nobody ever says. Like it's that level of ban. Like the worst of worst words.
Right.
So if we have to work that in somehow,
Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab my headphones because you're really quiet. 1 second.
Hello.
I don't know where I was going. They were right in the pocket.
Can you see Marie?
I can. Can you not?
I cannot.
Oh, I can see you.
I'm going to refresh my page.
Okay.
And we'll see what happens. Okay?
All right. If not, I'll refresh mine. But
I'll be right back, hopefully.
Okay. So, we're kind of back to the... All right. So the question becomes, how much time are we going to spend in the frame in this episode? If we're not going to spend a lot of time in the frame, it doesn't really matter that much.
Since this episode mostly takes place in like the void and the timeless halls, I think we need the frame just for some reality.
Right, yeah.
I mean, after this episode, we can start having very minimal frame, just like a brief introduction, story, brief wrap-up. Nothing really happens in the frame is okay. You know, like for episodes 4, 5, and 6, you know, like moving forward, the frame can all but disappear for a while. But not yet. At least in my opinion. We're still...
I tend to agree. So that means that we do have to have some kind of... We do need to have some kind of conflict happen.
Okay.
During episode 3's frame.
Yes. Now, at some point, we need to bring up the issue of Estelle learning how to use a sword and fight and all that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's supposed to tie in with the actual story in some way, which means probably that's later when the lamps get destroyed or something. When actual conflict happens,
Mm-hmm.
the real story would be a more appropriate place for that, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's the only other like temporary conflict that I recall being brought up by the host of something that needs to happen in the frame.
Okay. All right. I'm here. I promise. I swear I'm here. Okay. That's because she hasn't called back in yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So are you suggesting then that we bring some kind of physical, practical training into the frame at this point, or do you want to save that for a little later on?
I kind of want to save it for later, but in the absence of something else, or if we're going to decide that there's not time for that in the frame later, then work it in now. So I want it to happen well before the ramp up to the end of the last 5 episodes of the season. It has to happen well before that because it's such a small conflict. Nothing hinges on it. It needs to be a middle of the season conflict, not a
right. Yeah. Okay. Because I feel like at some point over the next few episodes, we're going to have to start to see Gilrine insist on some kind of practical education.
We can begin to set that up here because she can be a little bit mildly upset that the content of the lesson seems to be Melkor. Like, wait a second, why are you teaching my 10-year-old boy about this evil take over the world kind of guy? What's the point of this again? So it said that she was going to get upset about the lesson, and this seems like the lesson to get upset about.
I agree. Also, keep in mind that among the Dunedain, I mean, granted, this is thousands of years ago, but thousands of years ago, they were worshiping Melkor on Numenor.
Right.
So it's even more like, to her, it's like it's like he's telling the origin story of the devil. We have now completely lost Karita. Yeah.
I could see her and hear her before.
Oh, there she is. There she is.
Okay.
Okay. So we want so what we're suggesting is maybe it's not Glorfindel that objects to the lesson, but we're going to Gilrine objecting to the content of this particular lesson.
Right. There was a concern about introducing too many characters in the frame because this is already Cast of Thousands, and we're going to do Bilbo and the Dwarves later.
Yeah.
So as awesome as
I feel like it would be a mistake to not give us at least a cameo to Glorfindel.
Right. And, I wouldn't mind making that cameo happen right about the time that the Balrogs take the lamps out, because
that's
Glorfindel and Balrogs, kind of a thing.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. I kind of like that, too. Yeah.
But at this point, we've introduced Elrond and Gilrine in the first one with Estelle, but yeah. And in the second one, we wanted to focus more on Estelle as himself, not being a pawn of adults. So we did a little bit more with that. Also introduced the Sons of Elrond. So we've got new characters. And Gilrine wasn't in it at all, actually, for the second one. So having her come back in the third one is important. We can't leave her out for 3 frames and then all of a sudden have her be important.
Right.
So.
Okay.
No, so from that, I think we're ready for her. Another new character. It's like, are we going to introduce someone new in the frame every time?
Right.
Yeah. So that's where I feel like the sword fighting and Glorfindel should both wait for later.
I I tend to agree.
Which then brings up the point of what do we do now?
Right. Well, I feel like my video is choppy. Maybe if I stay very still. Yeah. I feel like having Gilrine. Oh, awesome. Having Gilrine be the one who's objecting it's a good way to go. I feel like it starts to set up the antagonism between her and Elrond as more than just, hey, you're stealing my son from me. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's more of an objection to content, and that's something where we can really emphasize her role as the mother who's concerned about making sure her son grows up into being a good, upright young man, kind of thing. Like it's a valid parental concern being expressed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to make sure it doesn't sound like she's the mom who goes to the PTA and complains about like what the teachers are doing.
Every little thing, every time.
Right. Like, I want to object because I heard that in school they were doing this. Like, the last thing we want is for her to be like that. Yeah. So it has to be a valid concern, and it has to be expressed in a way that doesn't sound like, I'm a helicopter parent in the Middle Earth. That makes sense. Like, it can't be like that. So we have to be a little careful with how we handle her objection and how she voices it.
Okay. Also, we need to figure out how we get out of that now.
You mean once she said it and Elrond's like, whatever, this is the lesson.
Right, yeah.
Because we're kind of going to tell the story of Melkor.
Right, yeah. Do we come back in to the frame in the middle to have that objection take place and then have it resolved? And then go back into the story?
I say yes, because like I said, this whole thing is in the void and the timeless halls until the very end. Right. So we need times to come back to like real places with buildings and trees and things because we need it. So interrupting with the frame in the middle of the story is not going to be bad for this episode.
Okay.
Whereas in future episodes, it'll be completely disruptive.
Yeah. Karina, just so you know... Thank you. I was going to say, because you're there as if you were in the conversation, but you're not really there.
I cannot see or hear you.
Okay. So Karina says part of that will boil down to delivery as well. The same exact lines read in different tones will read either PTA helicopter mom or as a very reasonable and loving parent.
Exactly. This is direction and acting. It's not
right. Hey,
I can see you. Hi.
Hi.
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
I can see and hear both of you.
Here we go.
We figured it out. It's awesome.
Okay.
Palantirs these days, I tell you.
So. The biggest issue then is going to be that we need to nail down right now is how does Elrond get her out of that?
I think that his response to her objection can be something along the lines of the people of Numenor didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They didn't know who Melkor really was, and that's why they fell the way they did. Had they known who he really was from the very beginning, they never would have gone that way. And he can say it like that, like, Estelle needs to know what this really is. If we hide this information from him, then how is that helping him make good choices later or something? You know, like, the argument of knowledge is better than ignorance.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good argument for him to make. Do we have Estelle kind of like stick up for himself at this point? Or are we not ready for that yet?
He probably would have had to have said or done something that clued her in that there was an issue with the lesson. So my guess is he's gone home and put his foot in his mouth about Melkor. like, so he could redeem himself at this juncture.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know how, but
This might be a question that is answered if I had been here for the last session, but how is young Estelle going to react to learning about Melkor and the corruption of evil? And is he going to be freaked out, or is he going to be combative in some way? He wants to go out and start killing bad guys right away. Like, how do you think he's going to react?
Well, let me ask you this. When you hear the story of the fall of Melkor during the beginning stages of the Silmarillion, how does that make you feel?
That's a good question.
Like,
when I first read the Silmarillion, I was pretty little when I read it the first time.
Okay, that's
so
perfect.
it was all very. You see where it's going right away. Just in the language of the story, it's obvious this is an important moment. This is a big thing that's happening, and it's
right.
An irretrievable step to fly in the face of the god character.
Right.
So there's some fingernail biting, but at the same time, you see right away where the story's going. It's not a cliffhanger of, oh, I wonder if he'll be redeemed. You just kind of know this is going to be the Satan character.
So the question then becomes, is it something that really freaks you out, or is it just something that is? Because it might be abstract enough to him that he doesn't really feel like there's this evil guy hanging up over his shoulder. Think about how you felt about. I mean, when you were a kid, I don't know how many times people told you about the devil, evil devil. I didn't really like. I had heard about this concept, and I grew up in a fairly religious home, but it didn't scare me. Like that didn't really have a lot of impact on me until I got older and started to really think it through, that there's some kind of evil spiritual power out there in the universe that could be in the same room with me, and I don't even know.
Yeah, like you probably wouldn't show the movie The Exorcist to a 10-year-old child. I mean, if you're a good parent. But at the same time, I think
as a kid, I got very introspective and kind of quiet and withdrawn when hearing about evil or things going terribly wrong. I got kind of quiet, and I had to do a lot of thinking about what the implications were. But I was that was my personality. So it kind of depends on what personality we think Estelle has and how he's going to react to this idea of grand evil on a scale that he can't really grasp.
Right. Well, and I think
that reaction that you have is probably similar to something we want to pull out in him, because what we know of him as an adult sounds like he is somebody who kind of sits around and thinks about things on his own.
Right.
I mean, so as a child, I could see him reacting in a similar way. And maybe that's where Gilrain notices something's wrong, is that he's very withdrawn and quiet. And she asked him, well, what's going on? And he's like, well, we were talking about the beginning of the world, and I realized that everything didn't work out so great, and there's problems. And I'd be like, what are you telling my kid? Like, maybe even Melkor's name doesn't come up in that. And then when she finds out that it's Melkor, that's when she loses her, I'll just let Elrond be in charge here, and decides to.
Okay.
Yeah, and even just thinking later on, when we're going to have the adventures of young man Aragorn, he is kind of a guy that goes off wandering in woods and thinking and about old stories and songs a lot. So if we telegraph that when he's pretty little, I think that would be it would work. He's an active character, but
right. Well,
I don't know it would be inappropriate.
Yeah.
So, again, do we have Estelle at the towards the end of when this second dip into the frame? Do we have Estelle wanting to know more? Wanting to wanting to delve deeper into this against the desires of his mother, or not?
Yeah.
Or do we have him be more passive in this episode concerning this?
I don't think we want him to be more passive. That's probably not the right note to hit.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like a passive character.
Right. Well,
but at the same time, do we want to put him in direct conflict with his mother over this issue?
Right.
That's a separate issue.
I mean, the direction that we're leading Estelle towards is one of more self-direction.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And in the end, sorry, finish.
Go ahead.
I was just say, in the end, when he grows up, is it going to be that he's more Gilryan's child, or is he going to be more Elrond's child?
Yeah.
And that's something that everyone involved is going to be very aware of if that shift happens. Yeah. If he goes from being her little boy to Elrond's pupil, that's going to be pretty significant. And it's totally something she'll throw in his face when he falls for Elrond's daughter. Like, this is all your fault.
This is all your fault.
Story.
You put these ideas in his head, telling him stories about people falling in love.
He wants an elf princess. Funny how that works. If you'd let me raise him as a normal human guy, we would have found him a nice Dunedain wife, and
and everybody would have been happy.
Settled down with a nice human girl. It would have been fine.
Your daughter for all eternity now. Great job.
Yeah, an I told you so moment.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
If ever there was one.
Yeah.
Okay. So we still have an open question.
Yes. I think Estelle should speak up and have an opinion and have a way to voice the value he's getting from the lessons. Up to this point, he hasn't really had to give feedback on the lessons, and this would be his chance to be like, well, this is what I'm learning. And he doesn't have to be like, shut up, Mom. Yeah. But he probably would speak for himself and be like, well, this is what I'm learning here. Is that good? Like, he can still ask her for approval, but he should have a voice.
And I mean, she hasn't expressly forbidden him from learning from Elrond. She hasn't said, stay away from that guy. So he can sort of have some autonomy toward the direction of learning more and voice it with his mother without being actively defiant.
Right.
It's more just an assertiveness.
Real quick, for anyone who's just joining us, this is the SilmFilm Project script discussion, season 1, episode 3. I figure I'm gonna say this every 20 minutes or so that when I break it up into pieces, there's an introduction at the beginning of each of them. Haha. Thinking things through. Okay. So right now, what we're doing is we're discussing the episode that's going to concern the origin of Melkor. I feel like if we've nailed down Estelle's reaction at this point, I feel like we've kind of nailed down the frame. Do we agree?
Except for the end of the frame, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But we can get
the beginning and middle of the frame sounds good to me.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
So, all right. So I listened to the podcast concerning this episode, and
You sound so excited about that. You're like, so I listened to the podcast. And
I swear it's going to get better. It's going to get easier. Yes, Riso Fidelis, episodes 1 and 2 are online available to watch. You can actually get episode 2 on YouTube, but it is 2.5 hours long. Episode 1 is over 4 hours long, so have fun with that.
Yay!
That's a ringing endorsement.
Yes. Like I was saying, my plan for this episode is to break it up into 20-minute or so chunks on YouTube so that people from the forums can watch them, so that we can go back and reference them without having to find a piece of information in the middle of a 4-hour-long episode. Okay.
True.
All right, so...
Yeah, my hope is that the extremely long episodes, for the very unlikely possibility that someone will come to this before they read The Silmarillion, they'll read The Silmarillion and you're like, wow, it's so coherent and so easy after, our meanderings.
Yeah. Let's kind of dive into the story now. Where are we starting? We're starting in the Timeless Hall. Before the music.
Yes, we should start even earlier than we started before, because the Timeless Halls before we started with Nienna singing.
Right.
So there's already a lot of Valar created. There's stuff there. Melkor's the first.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's one of the two first that we see.
Right. So Melkor could be in the Timeless Halls before there's any other Aenar there. Aenar, however you say this. But so we could see him be seeing the others created. Like the others are new and he's the guy who already knows what's going on.
Right.
Which gives him a big brother superiority thing.
Yeah.
That seems totally justifiable at first.
Okay.
You're new here and don't know how this works, but let me set you straight, and
okay,
that kind of attitude.
How does it work?
How does what work?
Well, you said that he's explaining to the newer Ainur how this is how it works here. How does it work? I
have no idea.
Well, that's the problem.
The halls are completely nebulous. Do they even? I mean, they're halls. Do they have buildings, or is it just blank space?
I feel like we're going to need to show some sort of structure as a metaphor for what's actually there.
I would hope so.
Yeah, we'll do the set guys a solid by giving them something to work with. Maybe
there was.
It's hard to make blank spaces interesting.
There was a mention on the discussion boards that for Utumno, Melkor would be trying to mimic the Timeless Halls.
Mm-hmm.
So we never did figure out what the Timeless Halls look like, but if he's going to be mimicking them, then there could be some kind of dome thing going on with the pillars that we could then reflect in his design.
Well, I can imagine that the Timeless Halls are appear infinitely huge. So basically, if you remember in Fellowship of the Ring, the Fellowship of the Ring film, when they do the big reveal of the dwarf city of Dwaradel, and Gandalf lights up his staff even brighter, and you see these pillars that just go on forever. I feel like it should be something like that. When we look off into the distance, we should just see these almost. I mean, they're semi-solid pillars that go off virtually forever. The host did discuss a conversation that Melkor has with Varda on the edge of the Timeless Halls, looking out into the void. So that would probably be the only time where we would see the edge of the structure.
Yeah.
Structure.
Yeah, I don't have any coherent thoughts at the moment about that particular scene.
Mhm.
But I do know that one of the thoughts that I had when thinking about this, what would the set look like, and what would Melkor's imitation of it look like? Just imagining, he thinks of, if there are archways in the Timeless Hall, I'll have more archways. You can never have too many archways. Like, if there are pillars, I'll make more pillars. Bigger pillars. So just...
Right.
Yes. Everything
Yeah, I'm
bigger because it's always better. And it sort of loses its beauty from being too much. Because that kind of... I like that for him.
Yeah. More
overdoing
is not always
things.
better,
Too much
Melkor.
kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yes. More is not always more.
Right.
The idea of them looking out into the void or the gray nothingness works in terms of, if you're imagining artists drawing a scene or people trying to put together a set, that would be doable. And that would make sense just symbolically also to an audience watching it of, oh, here is where Iluvatar is, and there's order and there's structure and there's form, and then everything beyond it is gray and misty and shapeless. So visually it works.
Right. Okay. So so we have to kind of, as a frame of reference, we have to kind of go back to the Timeless Halls to start with.
Yeah.
But we also have to establish that Melkor is leaving them to go out into the void by himself. Okay. So the question becomes, and we're going to have to do those two things relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
He can kind of seem like he's very comfortable in the Timeless Halls when there's nobody there, and then as soon as people start being there, he gets a little bit uncomfortable. Like, what are all these people doing here? This isn't my thing. And then just walks through the archway into the nothingness or whatever.
So do we kind of go back to the pre-music singing where we start to, as he's moving through the halls, and we start to hear the the ones and twos and threes singing, and he's just kind of like, that's not the way I do it, because he has no control over them.
Yeah,
that's why I feel he would be frustrated by others, because these are others who don't listen to him.
Yeah, anything that's different from him or isn't quite the way he would do it would be frustrating to him. I imagine.
Right.
He doesn't have that love of variety or the love of otherness that the others seem to have.
Right.
Yeah. So he could come up to a group of 2 or 3 who are like trying to sing together or do whatever it is they're doing musically, and he can try and like take over their little thing and be like, no. See, this is how you're supposed to do it. And when he does that, they just stop. Like, what? They're confused, and therefore they're quiet, and therefore it doesn't work.
Yeah,
they weren't his people, So he wouldn't take failure very well either.
Yeah, and if we see Melkor trying to interact and it failing in some way due to his own fault, probably, but still seeing him then withdraw, it does set him up to be kind of a sympathetic character to anyone watching who has ever been at a party or mixing with people and then realize that what they're trying to do isn't working.
Right.
And that they're very much the odd one out, and they kind of back through the doorway or wander into the kitchen or wherever there's fewer people.
Well,
and get a drink or something.
When it's their party, which to him it is, and he all of a sudden discovers that he's the awkward one, he's the odd one out, and so that kind of accentuates that feeling. You know, because this was supposed to be his thing. Like everybody should be looking up to him because he's the eldest, right?
So maybe his first interaction goes well. Maybe like he meets the Balrogs first.
Okay.
And they're all like, yeah, you're awesome. And he tries to teach them a song. They're like, we're playing that song. And they immediately take his lead. So he's like, all right, I got this. Goes to the next group and tries the same thing. And they're all like, who are you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that's when his attitude would shift towards, oh, I don't like this at all.
Yeah. Okay. And so, you know, we start to see him moving out into the void.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking for the flame imperishable.
Yeah.
I don't know how we bring that up.
I was just wondering that myself. All right. So
I was hoping you guys had ideas.
I mean, again, the easy way to kind of set it up in my mind is for how it is to have him wondering, is to have him have a conversation with Iluvatar to start out with. To have him asking Iluvatar what it is, you know, how he's doing this, how he's making these people, and have Iluvatar explain about the flame imperishable. But again, I don't feel entirely comfortable putting words in Iluvatar's mouth that Tolkien didn't put there. You know, like we discussed a while back, he's, you know, basically what we're doing is we're putting words in the mouth of Tolkien's idea of God, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. Yeah. So, what else is there? How
well,
else?
We can put words in the mouths of the Valar, though.
Yeah.
So if we show Melkor leave and go off into the void, like we don't necessarily know what he's doing or why he did that, except we got the impression he's uncomfortable, so he's leaving. We got that. Yeah. Then when he comes back, one of the others can ask him, "Where did you go? What were you doing?" And he can say, "I'm looking for something that's not here." Or that I can't, you know, and he can start explaining it. And they're like, "Well, what do you mean it's not here? Everything is here." It's like, no, there's something that, you know, gives a spark to life, and like, you know, he can have the station where he brings up the idea of the flame imperishable without naming it, as he's trying to describe what it is he's looking for and longing for. And depending on who he has that conversation with, their reaction to that could be enlightening. Because Varda should be the one most likely to know what that is. Like, she's got the light of Iluvatar in her face.
Right, okay.
The one part of Iluvatar she understands is likely the flame imperishable. Like, that's her part. So she could start expressing the "what do you mean it's not here" idea, if it's her that that he's interacting with.
Well, and she could,
and I think it works to have
it's gonna happen.
I think it works to have Melkor wandering off after feeling uncomfortable or feeling frustrated at not being able to take his rightful place as leader. If he wanders off just out of frustration and then has this sort of moment where he realizes there's something elusive, some kind of, this is my part now. I'm going to be the one to find the flame imperishable. I have some kind of need to discover it. It can be his new mission.
Right. Okay.
And something that sets
which creeps Varda out.
And something that makes him more important than everybody else who doesn't understand. Like, we need to set up, I mean, so much of his character is his pride. Right. And you can do that in a very sympathetic way of like, oh, that's so going to get you in trouble, dude. but it needs to be and like very unabashed at this point. He's not hiding his superiority. Yeah. Because he knows he's more than these other little peons.
He knows he's the best.
So
right.
At what point does he come back and try to get Varda to come out with him into the void? Do we think that he has a conversation with her, goes back out into the void, comes back, talks to her again, and
something would have to happen in the void the second time?
Okay.
And it's the void. Like, what happens in the void?
There's nothing out there.
Except possibly Ungoliant. We have mentioned that Ungoliant.
Yeah, that was kind of discussed that he could run into her out there. But how would that go down? What would happen there?
Right, that interaction wouldn't. Because, I mean, if Melkor doesn't understand what everybody's on about with this whole let's sing together thing, Ungoliant would be the last person to understand what that's about. Like,
what if he's the one who maybe he tells her about the flame, what he thinks about the flame imperishable, and she just really.
What would her reaction be? Well, I mean, what would Ungoliant's reaction be to hearing about the flame imperishable, other than I want to eat it?
Yeah, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Is it lunchtime? Because I'm starving.
That is terrifying. Never do that again.
I love Ungoliant as a character. She is one of the most striking, interesting, weird,
terrifying
Tolkien creations out there, I think. So I'm really excited about the idea of getting to know her in her non-spider eating everything form.
Yeah.
So
okay,
if that shows through a little bit, I apologize.
But no, it's good because she's a weird enough character that it's hard to understand her point of view. So if you like her, you're much more likely to be like, here's what she's about. This is what she's going to do in that situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
she has an edge of crazy that I like.
Right.
So, maybe that's what we need to do then. Maybe we need to have Melkor run across her, and maybe he's not entirely comfortable that there's somebody else out there.
So he can challenge her and be suspicious, like, what are you doing here? And she's like, this is where I am. What's... Okay.
I like it here.
Yeah.
Here.
It's nice.
It's quiet, or it was before you got here.
Yeah.
And maybe have some sort of not a confrontation per se, but have a definite level of antagonism between them.
Ungoliant's never met anyone before. She's always been alone. Yeah. She didn't know there was anything else out there in the world.
Okay.
And Ungoliant's reaction to finding out that there's more things out there in the world is, I want that. I would
imagine if the first person you ever met was Melkor. I mean...
like, this is going to explain her hang up too. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
No wonder she is so interesting. She's the first person, creature, being she's ever met is, Melkor. It's good stuff.
Right. And if he does tell her, if he does fess up and tell her that he's out there looking for the flame imperishable, that's going to start her desire for the light, which might be why she arrives in Arda. She comes to Arda because there's light there.
Yeah, like we should see, like as he's talking, just her eyes just light up with this idea of like, oh.
Yeah, and since he's associated with light and fire, I think we can get some vibe in there of, foretelling of her trying to eat him. Some kind of subtle cue, maybe just by body language, but these two as characters are very interesting when talking to each other and facing each other because they're very different in how they go about things and in the end goal, but they have desire in common. They just voraciously want something, be that domination or just to consume it. She doesn't want to be in charge. She doesn't want to be worshipped. She just wants to soak everything in.
She wants everything to be a part of herself.
Right.
Yes.
And
He doesn't want to absorb.
Well, but he takes that idea.
Rule.
He decides that the way he's going to control Arda is put his own force and power into it so that he can control the whole world. So he's kind of taking her vibe of, well, everything will be mine if I eat it, and say, like, well, everything will be mine if I put myself into it. So it's like an inversion of her idea, but there's a connection there. And if we're going to show her getting the idea of hunger and desiring other from his conversation with the flame imperishable, then he should be getting something from her as well, of realizing that you can interact with people in a way that's not what he's done so far. Because she should have a very femme fatale thing going on with, like, don't trust this person, but she's still, like, you know, getting a little too close to him. You're just like, oh, you get right in the face.
Smiles with many teeth, kind of.
Right, yeah.
You could get a line about, I'm starving.
A line about what?
Being starving. Are you hungry? I'm so hungry. Yeah. And he's like, what's hungry? I'm a disembodied creature who has never known what it is like to need food. What is this hungry of which you speak?
Which kind of destroys that little vibe right there.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I like the idea.
That could be a great way to end their interaction, where, like, she says, "Are you hungry? I'm hungry," and he's just like, "I don't know what that is, but I'm leaving."
Yeah.
Okay, so his first trip into the void, he's alone and nothing happens. But when he comes back, he admits what he was doing there was searching. The second trip into the void, he meets her, and their interaction reveals a little bit more what he thinks about the slime imperishable, and he does kind of flee her. Like, he might not admit that afterwards, but he freaks him out enough that he gets out of there. So when he returns to the Timeless Halls this time, he's fleeing the void, not just returning from the void.
Maybe this is why he wants Varda to come out with him.
Right. She's protection.
She's light.
I'm afraid of the dark. You're light.
So, you know, Ungoliant is the absence of light, and Varda is light. You know, so she's kind of like a countermeasure.
Yeah. So Varda's going to turn him down, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Well, I wasn't sure if it was going to be an instant shot down or entertain the idea and then say, but no. I wasn't sure.
Well, I would say, I think they kind of discussed this a little bit as well, where the host felt that have her kind of entertain the notion.
Right, because this is supposed to set up a love triangle, not between Ungoliant, Varda, and Melkor, but between Melkor, Varda, and Manwë.
Well, I mean, I don't know about a love triangle, but it is supposed to set up some kind of, you know, that there could have been a relationship there that wasn't. Right,
it's supposed to be a what could have been. So we need to show Varda have at least some initial rapport with him.
Yeah. It isn't like a Eowyn Wormtongue kind of thing where it's like, that will never work. This is not in the realm of possibility. It's more that could work if he wasn't a power-hungry demagogue kind of character.
Right. And that should be clear by the end of this, that Varda sees through him and wants nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have to start there, but she does need to end up there.
Yeah.
Real quick, before I forget to do this, for anybody who's just joining us, this is the SilmFilm Project Script Discussion Season 1, Episode 3. Basically what we're doing is we're discussing a theoretical adaptation of the Silmarillion to the screen in the form of a TV miniseries. I can definitely recommend that you check out mythgard.org and forums, right? forums.signumuniversity.org. Those links will be in the notes underneath the video. And basically this is based on podcasts that are done bi-weekly by Professor Corey Elson and Trish Lambert and Dave Kale. That takes place every Friday at 10 a.m. All right. So basically we're working through the origin story of Melkor. We have managed to kind of generally plot out his first and second trips into the void. Do we need more than that? Becomes the question.
Well, is the episode going to be longer than 20 minutes? Because if so, yeah, we kind of need something more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's the question. At what point have we interrupted this to go back to the frame?
That's a good question.
That's why I asked it.
And the host didn't touch that, really, did they?
No, of course not.
No.
Okay.
The question,
I don't think they conceived of going back and forth from the frame.
right. What question would Estelle have at this point in the narrative that he could ask that would bring us back into the frame?
I mean, a natural question to ask would be like, what's the flame imperishable? But
Exactly.
if we ask that question, we kind of have to answer it. And I don't know that we are equipped to do so. So,
Well,
Well, we don't want to put
we're
words
not-
in
I mean,
Elrond's mouth, so
the
letting Elrond
the
answer.
typical understanding of what the flame imperishable is that it's basically the Holy Spirit, that it is the source of all souls, basically the source of all spirit
To
comes from the flame imperishable.
the most concrete example is that when Iluvatar shows the Aenar the vision at the end of the music, they see it hanging in the void. They see Arda. It's just a vision.
Yeah.
Then when Iluvatar says, Ea, let these things be, he sends the flame imperishable to it and makes it real. So the flame imperishable is the spark of creation that like makes stuff out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like
Yeah.
in the book of Genesis where he says, and the earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. It's kind of like that a little bit. Anyway,
but the ability, the thing that's specifically tied to the flame imperishable is making something out of nothing. So that's a big deal. You can't do that, and the Valar can't do that, which we'll come up with all of. But
they can transmute one type of stuff into another type of stuff.
Right.
They can manipulate stuff, but they can't just create matter.
right, and that's what Melkor wants now. Melkor wants to be able to make his own stuff,
yeah.
Right.
and he can't.
Well, it's
That's
kind of like
all
the old joke where the scientist goes to God and says, "Hey, God, just wanted to let you know we don't need you anymore here on Earth." And God says, "Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we have a man-making contest?" So the scientist reaches down, grabs a handful of dirt, and said, "Okay, let's get started." And God says, "No. Get your own dirt."
Right.
Yes. So he's looking for dirt
but-
or the flame imperishable
He's
out in the
looking
void.
for the ability to make his own dirt.
The imperishable dirt in the void.
His own
Yes.
building materials, so he can make his own visions real. Because he should have visions at this point.
Yeah.
He should have all this stuff he wants to create and all this stuff he wants to do, and the
Because
timeless
he
halls don't
feels like
have
the
it.
Iluvatar isn't taking any thought for the void. He wants to do stuff in the void.
Right. The timeless halls are not enough for him. They don't have all the stuff that he's thought of. He's thought of all these ideas.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So maybe we could see a point where he's babbling on to Varda about, and I want to have this, and I want to make these things, and basically she's like, we're not there yet,
So
Who knows?
to circle
kind of
back,
the
is this the question
Say
that Estelle will ask? Maybe.
Oh yeah. Well,
What
here's
is
the thing.
the flame imperishable?
Well, here's the thing. how do we? Because we need to get Gilrine in there, objecting to something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she would object to a description of what the flame imperishable is.
Well, okay, so we can use that as the end of a lesson. Like, Elrond explains the flame imperishable and sends Estelle home. Estelle goes home and starts doing this introspective thing, and she's like, "You keep doing this.
Yeah.
How come every time you come back from your lessons, you're so quiet? What's going on?" And so we can have a scene at home with them that gets to it.
Right.
It's, however that plays out, sends Gilrine to Elrond.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we cut back to the frame after. I mean, because maybe he doesn't have to ask. Maybe he doesn't have to ask Elrond what the flame imperishable is, because Varda kind of explains it to Melkor a little bit. Like, as good an explanation as we're ever going to get anyway.
Yeah.
And that's the point where Elrond ends the lesson.
Okay.
For the day.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he sends them back to their apartment, guest house, wherever they are.
Mother-in-law suite.
He talks to Mom. Mom has a fit. Mom goes back to Elrond, either that day or the next day, with her concerns.
Right. I feel like we can let time pass, both in the frame and in the real story.
Right.
The Timeless Hall should be fairly timeless, and therefore no indication of how long has gone by.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So she goes to Elrond the next day, or whenever it is that she goes to him. He addresses her concerns, and then the next thing we have is him going into the rest of the story with Estelle.
So Ungoliant in the void now.
Yes.
Okay, so right after Gilrine's like, I'm not sure all this dark stuff is good, we have the story of Melkor and Ungoliant meeting in the void.
Yeah.
That's about as dark as this gets. So
I mean, thinking back to little small version of myself reading about Ungoliant, and the part of the reason I love her so much is I remember that reaction to hearing about Ungoliant and this creature who nobody knows where she came from, and she's just insatiable, and she, you know, that caught my attention and creeped me out incredibly. So if Estelle is creeped out or kind of just like quiet and down in the mouth, his mom's going to be concerned about that. And he's, well, why are you so serious? He's like, there's this creature, and, you know, a mom might have some valid concerns about that.
Yeah, and Melkor might not be all that scary at this point, because he hasn't done anything all that bad.
No.
So maybe up until this point, he's not really been concerned, but Ungoliant is scary. Just,
She's
you know,
scary.
Ungoliant is 85 times scarier than Melkor, no matter how you slice it. Like, she is way scarier than he is.
Yeah. I mean,
you can conceivably reason with Melkor and cut a deal with him. There's no, you run into Ungoliant and that's it. You're done.
Except never actually kills anybody.
Yeah. And I mean, I have several siblings that are significantly younger than myself, and I remember watching a black and white film with them about a submarine, and there's this scientist who experiments with this seaweed that comes to life and starts eating people, and it's very cheesy. It's like a ficus plant that shakes and people disappear into it. Yeah. But my younger siblings are about Estelle's age, had nightmares for weeks. It's not really about how... It's just a story that he's telling. He's not showing him R-rated films with blood and gore everywhere. But that idea of something that just consumes everything and is frightening and you can't reason with it, it's a powerful one for a little kid especially.
Yeah.
So maybe do the cut after he comes back from dealing with Ungoliant. Like, or after he encounters Ungoliant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then cut to the frame.
Yeah, because then there's a reason for Estelle to be withdrawn, whereas before that, there's not really. I mean,
well, that's what I was saying before. Like the story of Melkor in the Void.
It's not super scary. It's like once upon a time there was a guy at a party and he tried to kind of take over the conversation and it went really badly, so he went off on his own.
Yeah,
and not compelling.
It's not very impactful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So
it's
we
more
come
like
back
a middle-aged nightmare than a 9-year-old one.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because we kind of sympathize with Melkor at this point.
Right. Yeah, he hasn't set himself apart as being all that bad a guy, except for the whole interrupting the music thing, which just kind of makes him a jerk. Yeah. It's not really it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, up until this point, I would say up until the destruction of the lamps, he's just a bad person. You know, he's not evil. He's just a bad person. You know these people. We run into these people probably about twice a week, where this person's they're not a decent person who is looking out for the other guy.
Yeah.
But they're not out to get you per se. You know.
Right. Like not everyone is a saint and not everyone is a snake oil salesman. There's people who are kind of somewhere in between that they just aren't great people but aren't terrible people. They're just kind of people.
Yeah.
Like you don't turn your back on them, you don't trust them, but they're not going to actually do anything bad to you. They're not going to help you. If there's someone who's run under the bus, they'll throw you under the bus. But they're not going to like
setting Melkor up to be like a Dwight from The Office that at this point where he's not likable, but you don't hate him. He's a kind of a bad guy, but you know.
Well, and you know what? People like that character.
I know.
Yeah, but
this is just
people like a lot of bad guy characters. People love Draco Malfoy. And there's like nothing redeemable about Draco Malfoy because he's like a little jerk. Uh-oh.
He is. He's just terrible.
So I mean, if they can like Draco Malfoy, who's not even like bad guy, I don't know. Like because there's some like people like Loki too, but Loki's played by Tom Hiddleston. So
that's true.
Yeah. Well, but Loki also has redeeming qualities. He's clever.
And you see that he's had a bad deal, that his father kind of sucks, like both of them do. I mean, you know, so he gets the worst parents ever award, and you don't feel bad for the guy, even if he is a bit of a maniac.
Right.
And so, on a superficial note, we're probably going to be casting Melkor as a fairly attractive.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna get an actor that's good looking. You know,
that was my point. That if you cast a good looking guy, people are gonna like Melkor, even if he acts like a complete.
He's misunderstood.
Right. He's just misunderstood.
Yeah.
My wife watched Gossip Girl for a horribly long period of time, and there was a character, and I can't even remember this guy's name, but he was a horrible person, and but she liked him. She thought, she was like, well, yeah, but when she's friends with people who look out for them, that buys him nothing to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
But.
So there's that.
Okay, so we go back to all right. I feel like prior to him coming back from dealing with Ungoliant, I feel like we have probably about a half hour's worth of television there. Followed by, I mean, we could probably get another, there's another 15 minutes before we dip back into the story. 10 minutes. Let's say 10 minutes.
Well, the conversation between Gilrain and Elrond needs to cover a few points. So it can't be shorter than minutes because we have to end the lesson, have him go home, have her notice that he's quiet, withdrawn, have a conversation with him, then come back to Elrond, have a conversation with him. By the time you do all that, it is actually going to be 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that means that we have 15, 20 minutes
to
deal with his past at Varda.
Yeah.
I think that as the last thing that we see in the story, in the Timeless Halls, is Melkor out in the void by himself, looking towards the Timeless Halls, which there's light in the Timeless Halls.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because all of the Ainur are there, Iluvatar himself is there, so there's light there. To have him looking back at that, and I feel like that kind of is going to be a call forward towards him standing looking at the light from the trees by himself, and then him standing on the Pelori looking down at it. He's up there. Is this before or after? No, it's before the destruction of the trees with Ungoliant by his side now.
Yes.
So I feel like it's going to call forward to those moments, which we're going to see consistently appearing, to see him kind of out in the cold, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the conversation between him and Varda. He's trying to convince her to come out into the void with him.
Yeah.
He wants her companionship. He wants the safety of having another person there.
Yeah.
There's scary bits out there. Why did she turn him down?
She has no desire to leave Iluvatar
Right, okay.
at this point. Because there's nothing out there for her. Because a lot of the Ainur all leave to go to Arda once it's created. So they're going to leave the Timeless Halls. But right now, there's no reason to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So what
we get the impression.
I'm sorry, we get the impression.
We get the impression that the light of the face of Iluvatar is her thing. This is sort of the key characteristic about Varda. So the idea of going off into nothingness to seek a different light would be alien to her, would be unappealing, or even just it wouldn't have occurred to her to want to do that. So for him to have that kind of manic gleam in his eye about there's a different sort of, there's a flame, there's a light that we can look for apart from Iluvatar, would probably send off some warning bells in her brain.
Right. Well, okay, so then why would she have any inclination to follow him initially then? Because we have to, like, if we're going to have both of those moments, we need to have some kind of defining thing that happens.
So at first, he doesn't invite her to come along.
Right.
At first, he's just talking about how he sees the void filled with things, all these ideas he has that haven't come to fruition yet. He wants this all to be. Yeah. And when he's talking like that, she's like, yes, that's what I want too. Just, I don't feel like
I want to make stuff too, yeah.
So on that, they're in agreement. And then when he starts saying, and if we can just find the spark of the flame imperishable out in the void and make this ourselves, as soon as he goes there, he's lost her. She's like, no, what I want is here.
And she says, no, the flame imperishable is with Iluvatar.
Right. And he has to be like, wait, what do you mean? Because he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Because he's like, it's not here. I don't see it anywhere. And she says, no, it's with the Iluvatar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and even just some pretty subtle things about a change in the tone of the music as he's talking about these visions of glory that he has of things that haven't come into being. She can be buying into this idea and going, yeah, that sounds like a good thing. Mm-hmm. And then when the conversation switches more to, we can make it for ourselves if we find the flame imperishable. We don't need Iluvatar. He probably won't say that, but the music can shift tonally to give this clue to the audience of this was where he lost her and
Right.
changed her
And you'll be able to see that.
opinion or her persuasion.
And he loses her approval fairly permanently at that point. Like, she's going
Right.
to be one of the most outspoken voices of, this guy's not going to change, and he's committed to a path that doesn't go with the Valar. Like, she's going
Right.
to consistently say,
Yeah.
this is going nowhere good, guys. And
Yeah.
and we have to give her a reason. If she's going to be that adamant later on, we have to make it very clear in this conversation that she sees what he's all about. She gets it, and she totally rejects him. Poor guy. Aww.
Okay. Real quick, for anyone who's just coming in, this is the SilmFilm Project script discussion, season 1, episode 3. We're basically working our way through discussing the origin of Melkor for the purpose of a theoretical adaptation of the J.R.R. Tolkien's Silmarillion to the screen in the form of a television. The word miniseries. That word, yes.
Series, not a miniseries. This is a series.
Well, yes, but a television series. But the idea of it anyway. But so, welcome anybody who's there. I have links underneath the video for Mythgard.org and forums.signumuniversity.org, where all of this discussion is taking place. So we're getting close to the end here. We're unbelievably, we are getting close to the end of an episode. I don't know how it happened.
Because we are professionals and know what we're doing, and we're efficient with our time and discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go with that.
Such an underwhelming response.
Unlike other individuals,
yeah, that.
Who can't get any kind of detail done in 2 hours, we can.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we need to. Okay, so he has the conversation with Arda. Doesn't go well. He goes out by himself again into the void. The last thing we see of him is him looking at the Timeless Halls from the void. So we got to get back into the frame real quick. And then we can kind of go back and fill in any details that we missed, because we still have a little bit of time left. So we go into the frame, and what's there? Where are we?
I don't know if this is the right place to cut back into the frame.
Okay. What else do we need? Okay.
We're not going to re-show the music of the Ionar. That's not going to happen.
No.
So I can see how a cut would take care of that and be like, and then the music happened, like we talked about 2 episodes ago.
Right.
But if we're going to have him out in the void looking back at the Timeless Halls, we could also have him out in the void looking at Arda from the outside at some point. So
yeah, that's right. Because that was gonna. You're right. That was gonna happen.
Yeah. It might be that there's a perfect place to cut, because we see him looking at the Timeless Halls. We cut back, have a little conversation, come back to and here's Melkor in the void again. But now the music has already happened. Some of the Ionar have gone into Arda, and here he is outside looking in at the creation it's hanging in the void, just like he wanted there to be stuff in the void. This is what he wanted, but he didn't do it.
Yeah.
So here's the question, because we kind of have 2 options here. Do we have him just off looking at Arda in the void, close enough where he can see the events, where he can kind of see the events that we were talking about in episode 2 taking place, where he can see creation taking place? Or do we have him looking at a fairly static world, and there's kind of this slight implication that that's happening now in the time of the frame. I mean, it's not, but it would kind of be a little bit. It would be a little spooky if we went from the frame into him looking down at the world.
Because
that would be spooky.
We actually do know that Melkor's out in the void looking in at the time of the frame.
That's true. What he can see, I don't
know. Like the whole, like, where are these things now? And Tolkien talked about this a little bit when he talked about why dragons are scary in stories. And that's why the kids ask, wait, is this a real story? Because they want to know if they're going to get eaten by a dragon. So as long as you say there aren't any dragons, as long as you say there aren't any dragons around here right now, the kid can sleep well. Yeah. But you didn't tell him dragons aren't real. So if Estelle has been slightly disturbed by this whole Ungoliant thing, it's like, well, where's Melkor right now? I don't think we want Elrond to answer that question because that kind of defeats the entire purpose of telling the stories of the First Age. But at the same time, if he said something, well, did Melkor ever die? Like, did he get destroyed? It's like Elrond is going to have to honestly say, well, no, not really. He's still alive. But don't worry, he can't come here. To which Estelle's going to be like, wait a minute. Like, I don't know if we need to get into any of that.
Why is that? And Elrond's going to be like, we'll get to that. And then the next thing you see is Melkor just hovering out in the void, looking at our.
I don't think we really want to do that because we're not trying to turn this into a horror movie. I mean, it's already the Silmarillion. But
well, I mean, this is one of the spookiest episodes thus far. So
yeah, it's going to get all actually significantly happier from this point on. Like season 1 is much more positive than the rest of the story. The rest of the story goes downhill rapidly. And season 1 already.
In season 1, they win. They win in season 1.
Yeah, like there's some negative things that happen along the way, but no one really dies, and everything kind of turns out okay.
And they have a war. I mean, that's pretty bad news, but
nobody dies.
But they do win the war.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, it goes really well for everybody. So if you watched season 1 of this show, you might think like it's not that dark, and then the rest of the Silmarillion happens. It's like, wait, I thought this story was a happy story. It's like you should have paid more attention to that song in the beginning when Yenna is singing. That was your first clue.
Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna have a bunch of critics or people complaining on the internet of, I really liked the first season, but then it just got really dark.
Yeah.
And scary.
It was trying to be darker and edgier and more adult. No, that's just the way the story went. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does do that.
Yeah.
So okay. So do we want to have him seeing the work being done in Arda then?
It might not be a bad idea to keep it static, just because of the idea of from the outside looking in. What's that stupid Bette Midler song? I forget the lyrics, but it's something about the world looks beautiful from up above.
From a distance?
Yes, that one. I can't stand that song. But, I mean, I'm sure it's a nice song. The idea is so syrupy that I can't.
Yeah. No, I know. I understand.
But part of the idea is that, like, from far away, everything looks nice. You can't see the problems with it. So maybe it should look kind of from a distance like at this point.
Now, there have been some, I'm remembering now that there have been some discussion of him arriving in Arda, and then the Valarkar, or however you pronounce that word,
the Proto-Balrogs,
congregating around him. Say again?
The Proto-Balrogs.
Yes.
Yes, the Proto-Balrogs.
Yes.
Valarkar
arriving afterwards and congregating around him. Do we want that? Because I don't think that was something that was...
I want him to have followers. I don't want him to be alone. But that's not the only opinion here. So.
Well, I mean, it was discussed. I don't think it was like hard line decided. But oh wait, hey, I can just look at the notes. Megan takes excellent notes. I'm going to look at them real quick. Hold on.
My recollection was that at first they liked the idea of the Balrogs being there and joining him, and then they wanted him to end the scene alone, because so much of this episode he's alone, and that's so much of his character is that he is alone. So there was some idea of him being alone at the end of the episode would be more powerful than him having
it works more for his character for it to end with him alone.
Right.
Yeah. I do tend to agree with that myself.
Yeah. And in episode 4, he can get his groupies and then meet the rest of the Valar and go from there.
Yeah.
But I mean, so I see the value of that. It's so important for him to have followers, and he's got these fanatically devoted followers already. Like, I don't know, I kind of feel like we should see them in this episode. If this is all about him, they're an important part.
Let me ask
and we could have seen him in the very beginning.
What about this for a suggestion? We see him looking down at Arda. And then the camera pans around him, and you see the proto Balrogs there with him, hovering behind him, and he says something to the effect
just like hanging out creepily in the distance.
Well, no, just like kind of clustered around him, like they're ready. They want to know, what do we do now, boss? That kind of thing. And and he says something like, wait until I call, and we see him go down into Arda by himself. So we kind of get both things.
Okay.
I do like the idea of establishing that they will do whatever he says.
Yeah.
Because that's, at least for season 1, that is their character, is that they are fanatically devoted to him.
Yes.
If he says jump, they jump. If he says wait, they wait.
Yeah.
There's
it
stormtroopers.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right, but
his brown shirts.
Yeah, but they're very willing to just do whatever. So they're good minions.
Yeah.
But to a point that we're going to see other Valar-Maiar interactions where the Valar's the boss and the Maiar are the little followers, the worker bees. But it's not going to be that level of... Same. Yeah. So we want it to look very different.
And we see people have differing opinions. We see Aule have differing opinions with his guys. We see Olmo having a problem with Asa. We're going to see that the Valar do not have control over their Maiar in the same way that Melkor has control over the Valar.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is a posse. And the others don't have posses.
Yeah. And I think the Balrogs have this potential to give off a very sort of vibe, this charismatic leader that they're slavishly devoted to. It's not the same relationship as co-collaborators, and you have Michelangelo with his students who are also talented. It's a more creepy,
Manson kind of stuff,
slavish kind of,
Okay. So do we have, how much do we have of Melkor and Arda then? So we have him go down to Arda alone.
Mm-hmm.
And do we have him do anything there? We could potentially set up...
Yes, we could.
We could...
But we have to end on like an end note. And like Melkor in the middle of mucking around trying to figure out how Middle Earth works is
really an end note.
Probably not like an end scene. It's a... And then he like played with fire for a bit and it didn't go the way he expected. So it like, what? So
Okay.
I have trouble seeing how that ends.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, does Middle Earth, does Arda even have like a high place that Melkor could stand looking down at what his would-be dominion's going to? I mean, can we end on it?
What's that?
Could he be looking down at the wild possibilities? And we end on that sort of note.
We're having a lot of scenes
he could
of
look
him
on the
looking
site
down at things.
Well, maybe that's what he does. But he could be looking at the site where he's going to build Utumno.
Yeah. And maybe
so he could be. I mean, if
do
he's going to go somewhere, it should be bigger.
Maybe he could do the Elsa from Frozen scene where he just
My kingdom
and things start to come
Yes.
up.
Yeah.
Too much.
Maybe not. Maybe that would be goofy. But I mean, we can. If we're going to have him do something, it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that can be the outtake. And now I make Utumno.
But maybe
Yes.
Maybe have him do some kind of lava thing. I don't know. Like have him do something to display his raw power.
Okay, so he lands, right? And then as he takes his first steps into Middle Earth, like the ground beneath his feet can be like breaking up and let lava ooze out or something. Like he can be having that kind of effect.
Or just like holes and fiery cracks in the earth where he steps.
Yeah.
Because of that just raw energy coming off of him. Yeah.
Or do we want it to
Maybe.
be ice?
Have you seen pictures of the Devil's Causeway in Northern Ireland?
No.
No.
Okay. So Devil's Causeway, it's a rock formation area, and it's a lot of like little tiny pillars of rock. So like it's all cracked down, but it makes all these little pillars.
I think I've heard of this, yeah.
So
I am Googling it right now.
Okay. There's no fire. It's just rocks. But it could be that kind of, like he could make that kind of landscape happen around him, like broken rock.
It's gorgeous.
Yes. I mean, this is one of the things you visit if you go to Northern Ireland.
Yeah. I think our location finders and set dressers are going to love this idea.
I have definitely heard of this thing. Yeah.
Very cool.
So, yeah, it's famous. It's very famous. And I'm not suggesting that we need to do exactly that, but something where it looks like broken ground would be good. And whether we could do ice stuff with it, with like glaciers, we could do volcano stuff with fire, we can do magma coming up. We can do whatever, but I want something where it looks like the earth is broken because Melkor walked on it.
No, I like that.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Okay.
One.
So is this before? So do we have, the question is, do we have all this happen before we go back to the frame for the final time, or is this after? And this is how we're closing the episode.
We might be done with the frame at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might be able to close the episode with this moment of him looking
a final time. So we start in the frame, we do the break in the frame with the frame in the middle, and then our kind of break from the timeless halls and all that is Melkor coming down to Earth.
Yeah.
Middle Earth, and starting to demonstrate his chaotic extremity powers.
Now, did we have a second break where the narrator, who's Elrond, is like, and then the music happened? Like, is there some clue to let the audience know that we've skipped over the really big important thing that happened in the Timeless Halls?
Yep.
I think we have to, like,
because I don't know how else to transition that.
I mean, I don't want to have to do that, but I guess we kind of do.
We don't have to. Yeah. We have to figure out a way of doing it. And one way is to take the last note of the music and like return to the music scene and see Melkor leave. Like, we've seen the music from Iluvatar's point of view and from all the Valar's point of view, but we could get Melkor's reaction to the music now. And it's... Yeah. Like, so we can just jump in right there. We don't have to replay the whole music again.
Yeah.
Or do we have the... Okay. Yeah. If we...
This episode is shaping up to be kind of all about Melkor. So getting Melkor's reaction or getting some kind of point of view from him in the music would be appropriate.
Well, we were getting some shots of Melkor during the music in episode 1.
Yeah.
But if we see him during the vision,
there's an idea.
And we can see him. We can see, and we focus on his face. Like we go back to the vision. We see all the Ainur gathered round. We know where we are and what's about to happen. But then we turn around and we focus on Melkor's face, and we see his face and his reaction to the music.
Yeah.
And then the next thing we see is him hovering above Arda, surrounded by his minions.
Yeah. Yeah. He and his group leave the Timeless Halls after
the vision.
And a lot of the are leaving to go into Middle-earth, but he leaves to go to the Void.
He goes after.
And that
right.
That leaving out the side exit kind of thing should look very different from what they're doing, and he should be very conflicted looking of what he makes of all this. Because he wants it to be his, but at the same time he's a little mad that it was somebody else's idea. Yeah. Like, he didn't do it, so it doesn't count. It's not right.
But it's the best he's going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he still wants it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have to somehow show all that play out. We do have his minions. If we need him to say stuff, he has people to say stuff to.
Right. Proto-goth.
But it would be a lot of facial expressions to get that across.
Right. Which I think is certainly doable. We're certainly putting a lot of pressure on our actors to we're putting a lot of trust in our actors' ability to express the things that we want to express without saying anything. We've done it fairly consistently through the whole bit. But I mean, there are a lot of actors out there that we know can do that. So I don't think that we're going to have too much.
We need somebody who can have that light in his eyes that could be passion, or it could be the startings of someone who's becoming a little bit close to unhinged or headed that direction.
As Melkor for the entire time.
Who did you want to cast?
Michael Fassbender. Clearly,
obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. Anyway, so we have them leave. We have them, and we have his interaction with the Proto Balrogs. We have the the descent into Arda. His descent into Arda. Is there anything that we want to, because it's getting on to 8:40 now, is there anything that we want to go back over at this point?
I have one thing a little far back about the thing that little Estelle breaks while playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm.
Would it be too cheesy if it was like it was Elwing and her true love and it breaks separating them too much? I mean, I'm heavy on the romance there, but
well, that's a great
it would work later when the audience sees their sad story and the separation, and they're like, oh, that's who that was. That's sad. And all the if it's too much, that's okay.
I feel like we should throw lots of stuff in that doesn't make any sense at the time, but will make more sense later.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect opportunity to. Everyone will understand if something breaks, you're upset that the thing broke.
Yeah.
You don't need to know who it is or the significance at first.
Right. Yeah.
Just like if Gilran's going to bring up, why are you talking about Melkor? You know how that went in Numenor.
Yeah.
Like, the audience doesn't know how that went in Numenor.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that she knows and Elrond knows doesn't mean that they've explained themselves.
Right.
So they can have their argument that makes sense without us knowing the backstory. And then when you get to the backstory, it's like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Yeah, that was a terrible time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Tolkien does that throughout his stories consistently.
Yeah.
Always references to things that you
Yeah.
don't really know the full story of.
Yeah.
And since we're telling the original stories, it's hard to do that. So we have to do the references backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Where someone in the frame mentions something that's going to happen later.
I also want to do a spin-off. I thought about this on my way home today. I want to do a spin-off that's the story of the Rohirrim. Because we're definitely, like, there's no way we're covering that. There's no way. And to just see the Rohirrim cycle, like, that would be awesome.
Here you go. We do know that Aragorn, who is apparently one of our main characters, spends time as Thornhill, being a rider of Rohan and hanging out with Denethor's dad.
It's in the text,
Thelian.
and that is an invitation. We can just take that one sentence and run with it. That's a whole series right there.
We could use the adventures of Aragorn to be more frame for more story later, and then work in the history of Rohan and the history of Gondor in those segments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't know how much we're going to use Aragorn, but I'm thinking we're going to use him as much as we can. So,
yeah.
So do we think we have this wrapped up? Is that possible?
We are.
We left some things.
Professionals.
What? Well,
we left some.
Yeah,
well, what have we
there's
got?
some polishing to be done.
Well, yeah, but I feel like a lot of the polishing we can do in the whatchamacallit, in the outline as we go over it.
Yes.
By breaking this up, it's going to be a lot easier for me to go through and kind of black out the outline in text. Because I just didn't want to watch the 4.5 hour video to do that. I had to kind of just work from memory.
Very kind of you. Very considerate. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have to do the rough outline for this, and then go back to working on the more detailed outline of episode 1, which I'm still in.
I kind of wish we had.
Is she frozen for you? Oh, she moved.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. There she is.
Yes. I wish we had a storyboard artist on retainer who we could be like, can you block this out for us visually and see if it might help us make sense of it and make sure it's going to work. Because some things make sense on pages that don't.
Learn to draw for reasons of that nature, but I just don't have the patience. I really don't.
Yeah, you don't want me drawing anything.
No.
Yeah,
I
can draw out set designs. I can do
some
that.
of my artwork laying on the floor.
Okay. So architecture's kind of your thing?
Well, I mean, I originally went to school for aerospace engineering, so like I can do a technical drawing, kind of. I've also spent a lot of time doing dungeon maps for tabletop role playing games, which is actually more or less the same kind of thing. You actually are designing a set where a scene is going to take place, so it's not that far off. Okay. Well, yeah. I'm gonna stop the recording at this point, unless there's anything else that we want to get into real quick. Okay.
All right.
Cool. All right. So this has been the SilmFilm Project Script Discussion, Season 1, Episode 3. Anybody who has made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to have links in the notes for anybody who wants to check out what we've been doing. Thank you very much. Have a great day.